Good evening, everyone. It is 6:16 p.m. on a beautiful Tuesday,
Hmm.
June 17th, 2025. When you guys catch me on the intro looking down, it's because I'm actually looking at my calendar because I can never remember what actual day it is. But it is, in fact, June 17th, 2025, right now. A lot of amazing things are happening. So many people are suffering and dying, and lots of people are freaking out about planes crashing and wars going on and babies getting eaten on the streets. But we don't care about any of that, do we, Smokey?
Not one bit.
And why is that? Tell me one more time.
We got philosophy.
Damn straight we do. We have philosophy, the perfect safe bubble to think and to reflect. And speaking of reflection, do you mind telling everybody a little bit about what we did last week?
Sure. So last week we read about three, four paragraphs talking, sort of breaking down this idea of substance in a little more detail and describing how you've got primary and secondary, but that when we think of the subject, we tend to think in terms of primary substances, and when we think of genus and species, we think of those as secondary subjects,
Mm,
and that you can't really you can't really describe the primary. You can't use the primary to describe the second. I'm sorry. One more time. You can't use the secondary to describe the primary. It's got to go back up. If I don't have that primary substance, then I lose any relationship to a secondary substance.
gotcha. There's a sequential nature to these things, and they move in one direction.
Yep.
And just like the one direction we're moving in, which is forward, what do we
Yes.
got next? What are we doing?
So today we're going to be reading a little bit about how, okay, we got to go back so we can go forward.
Mm,
After we told
okay.
you we're moving forward, we got to go back. He's
Well, fuck
actually
me
going to,
then.
yeah.
It kills my segue.
He basically says, well, don't forget we were talking about substance, but we were also talking about presence
Okay.
and differentia, and so he brings forward, I guess would be a better way of putting it than going back. He brings forward some ideas that he's already introduced.
Right. He's basically, he's taking care of one portion of his ideas, and now he's layering in the rest of it or the next set of it to
Yes.
continue like building on this
Yeah.
foundation that he has.
Yeah. And
Okay.
and well, anyway, no segues. All right. So are we ready?
I am absolutely ready to go. I know if I remember correctly, we're going to be doing it's going to be more reading and less slides, just like last time,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And
Just
it's
like
not
last
just
time.
because this bear
It's
is getting lazy. It's because that is what we're covering right now. It's going to be
hey, it's
got to get more done.
summer. It's hot.
That's true. Yeah. Everybody knows bears hibernate in the summer. What are you talking about? You're supposed to be the most active. Yeah. Well, let's dig into it.
All
I'm
right.
excited.
So it is a common characteristic of all substances that it is never present in a subject. Four, primary substance is neither present in a subject nor predicated of a subject. While, with regard to secondary substances, it is clear from the following argument, apart from others, that they are not present in a subject. For man is predicated of the individual man, but is not present in any subject. For manhood is not present in the individual man. In the same way, animal is also predicated of the individual man, but is not present in him. Again, when a thing is present in a subject, though the name may quite well be applied to that in which it is present, the definition cannot be applied. Yet of secondary substances, not only the name, but also the definition applies to the subject.
Hmm.
We should use both the definition of the species and that of the genus with reference to the individual man. Thus, substance cannot be present in a subject. Should I continue?
Continue. Yeah.
Yet, this is not peculiar to substance, for it is also the case that differentiae cannot be present in subjects. The characteristics, terrestrial and two-footed, are predicated of the species man, but not present in it, for they are not in man. Moreover, the definition of the differentia may be may be predicated of that of which the differentia itself is predicated. For instance, if the characteristic terrestrial is predicated of the species man, the definition also of that characteristic may be used to form the predicate of the species man, for man is terrestrial. The fact that the parts of substances appear to be present in the whole, as in a subject, should not make us apprehensive, lest we should have to admit that such parts are not substances. For in explaining the phrase being present in a subject, we stated that we meant otherwise than as parts in a whole. It is the mark of substances and of differentiae that in all propositions of which they form the predicate, they are predicated univocally. For all such propositions have for their subject either the individual or the species. It is true that, inasmuch as primary substance is not predicable of anything, it can never form the predicate of any proposition. But of secondary substances, the species is predicated of the individual, the genus, both of the species and of the individual. Similarly, the differentiae are predicated of the species and of the individuals. Moreover, the definition of the species and that of the genus are applicable to the primary substance, and that of the genus to the species. For all that is predicated of the predicate will be predicated also of the subject. Similarly, the definition of the differentiae will be applicable to the species and to the individuals. But it was stated above that the word univocal was applied to those things which had both name and definition in common. It is therefore established that in every proposition of which either substance or a differentia forms the predicate, these are predicated univocally. And thus endeth the reading.
Okay. I feel like I am in Spanish class again, and we got through the conjugations and male and female, naming of things. And, I got a grasp on that. We're good. And then the teacher just started speaking Spanish at me and expecting me to like understand what the fuck's going on. All right, I am completely lost.
All right.
I'm going to be straight with you. Let's go step by step here.
It is a common characteristic of all substance that it is never present in a subject. What is a subject?
A subject is the core of what we're discussing.
It is the individual.
Well, it can. That's the thing is that it can be an individual,
Yes.
but the subject can also be, you know, a the like the category as well. But
No,
yeah.
no, not in this case. In this case, the subject is the individual. So you could read that sentence as it is a common characteristic of all substance that it is never present in an individual subject. One thing, one
Okay.
man, one
Okay.
tree, not all men, not all trees.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Let's keep going.
For primary substance is neither present in a subject nor predicated of a subject.
Okay.
Because
So
when we talk about a primary substance, we don't talk about the individual.
right.
We talk about what makes that individual be a part of a category.
Right. So what he's saying is that when we're discussing a subject or an individual subject, we're definitively like insulating it from the greater category that it may be a part of.
Yes.
But because of that, the primary substance can't be present.
Yes.
Because if it were to be present he's not saying like he's not saying like materially or even ontologically it's not present. He's saying linguistically it's not present.
Yes,
Like rhetorically it's not present because if it is, then you
it
have
can't
to
be
be present.
present in another subject,
Right. Okay.
which
Okay. That makes more sense.
now
That
the
okay.
individual subject is a category unto itself.
Right. And that doesn't help talking.
That- that's a
Right.
great way
Okay.
of putting it. It doesn't help.
Okay. Now I understand what that means. Okay.
For,
Um,
for man is predicated of the individual man, but is not present in any subject. So when I use the word man, it is predicated of the individual man, but it is not present in an individual man.
right.
You're not the only one.
Right.
For manhood is not present in the individual man. There, Arnold Schwarzenegger is not the only, he's the manliest man. No, he is just a man. There is some substance that we use to qualify him as a man, but he doesn't have it all.
I get it. Okay. So actually I have to use an example here because I'm like right at the boundaries of me grasping this. Um, if if some alien came down and I had a glass of water and he was like, "What is that?" And I said, "That's water." He was like, "Oh, that's amazing." And then we went on a trip together and we went to the beach. And he was like, "What's all that?" I said, "That's water." And he was like, "Well, I thought that was water." Then what I
Right.
would say is like, I didn't mean that glass was all water. I didn't mean that that's all that water was, right?
Yes.
That's what he's saying when he's saying it's not present in the glass of water, the like water as a category is not present in all like univocally all in this glass of water. This is
Yes.
just some water. So
This,
it's a substance of the subject.
yes.
Okay. Okay. I'm starting to okay, we're moving forward. Let's keep going.
And all he says through the rest of this paragraph, in the same way, animal is also predicated of the individual man, but is not and really should have used the word, but is not completely present in him.
Right. Okay. Now he's just identifying like, look, it's not just a binary here. There are levels. This
Yeah.
is a part of a greater hierarchy.
Again, when a thing is present in a subject, though the name may quite well be applied to that in which it is present, the definition cannot be applied. Yet of secondary substances,
Real
not only
quick.
the name,
So real
yes,
quick, I'm sorry. Would that be an example of derivative or naming or equivocal naming? Because you can see it go both ways there.
you're right. And that's why he's going to clarify it as we
Okay.
move
Okay.
forward.
Gotcha. Okay. Let's keep going. All right.
Yet of secondary substances, not only the name, but also the definition applies to the subject. We should use both the definition of the species and that of the genus with reference to the individual man. Thus, substance cannot be present in a subject. We should use both the definition of the species, so the species that man falls in,
Mm-hmm.
and the genus that man falls in, both definitions, although they're not the same definition, right? We have one definition for species, one definition for genus.
Mm-hmm.
And that definition creates a category, yes?
Yes.
And man can fall in both.
Right. Because man can be present in those definitions because man is present.
Yes,
Right. But it doesn't go the other way around.
it doesn't go the other way around.
Okay.
The arrow only goes in one direction.
Right.
Yet this is not, and so this is where he has a little segue word for the day. If you don't know what that word means, look it up. Yet this is not peculiar to substance, for it is also the case that differentiae cannot be present in subjects. The characteristics. So he's using a synonym for differentiae,
Mm-hmm.
characteristics. So a characteristic is something that can be used to differentiate. And he identifies two. He says terrestrial and two-footed are predicated of the species man, but not present in it.
And again, to kind of translate that, it's that while a man may be two-footed, two-footedness is not an entirely presence with
Yes.
this one man. This isn't the totality of what two-footedness is or can be. And
Yes.
that's what presence would be.
Yes.
Got it. Okay.
And if you see a man swimming, does that mean he's no longer terrestrial?
No.
No,
Right. Okay.
for they are not in man. How moreover, the definition of the differentia may be predicated of that of which the differentia itself is predicated. For instance, if the characteristic terrestrial is predicated of the species man, the definition also of that characteristic may be used to form the predicate of the species man. So how I define terrestrial can also be used to define man.
Okay. So in that case, what's the significance of making this claim?
Can you use that which you are defining in the definition of that thing? A man is a
What?
man.
Right.
Can you say a man is a man? And that is an
Like
adequate.
if somebody says define man for me, and you say a man is a man that has 2 feet.
No,
Well,
no,
I'm
no. I didn't say that. If you say a man, is that a satisfactory definition for the term man?
no.
Not as an individual, but as a group.
Right. No,
No.
it's not.
But if I can define the word terrestrial, then whatever definition I use for terrestrial, I can incorporate that into the definition of man as a group.
Okay, so framing wise, it's he's kind of like playing chess a little bit because like you see Socrates, someone goes, "What is it? What is a man?" And Socrates goes, "Well, a man is terrestrial." Someone goes, "Well, what is terrestrial?" Right? Or
Yes.
Socrates would ask that question. So Aristotle's kind of pivoting the focus here, and it's like, okay, well, if we start with a primary substance, and then we start defining and building up from there,
Yes.
then we'll eventually land on man. And we've already done all the groundwork to get there. So we don't get caught up in this bullshit.
Yes. And you can't say
Okay.
something like, and one of the classical ones is um
This is hurting my brain.
no, no, no. Thanasi has a mustache. Thanasi is a man. All
Okay.
men have mustaches.
Right. Yeah, and it's like that's incorrect, obviously,
The
right?
fact that Thanasi has a mustache does not apply to all other men. That's just a characteristic of Thanasi.
So the mustache can be used as differentiate between myself as a man and a platypus, but that shouldn't be mistaken for every single time you want to find the difference between a man and a platypus, you should look for a mustache.
Yes.
And then you're like, wait, maybe was this guy a platypus? What's going on?
Yeah.
Right. Okay,
And
got it.
we're back to the featherless biped
Let's not get into that.
definition.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Yeah.
This is not
Okay.
easy. The fact that the parts of substances appear to be present in the whole as in a subject should
Yeah.
not make us apprehensive, lest we should have to admit that such parts are not substances. And that's what we're saying. If there is the you don't look at the individual and say that individual contains all substance related to that species or that genre, because the substance is not within the individual. The substance applies to the group,
Right.
to the category.
Right.
And if you lose a foot, are you still two-footed?
Right.
Yes, but I only have one foot. Well, now we're getting into a weird argument that doesn't make any sense.
Sure. Yeah.
And then we get into the definitions. It is the mark of substances and of differentia, so it applies to both, that in all propositions of which they form the predicate, they
Real
are.
quick, what does he mean by propositions here? This is
In
another
other words,
one.
if I make a statement of fact,
Okay, so or a truth claim, or just
yeah,
a
a
statement.
truth claim. I'm
Okay,
making a
so if I
truth
make a
claim.
truth claim and the the substances and the differentiate in that truth claim form a predicate of what I'm leading to?
That it has to be univocal. It has to be universal in its app. Remember, what is a univocal definition?
It covers all the name,
And the
uh,
definition,
and yeah, and the definition fit well with more than one thing, or fit more than one thing.
well, they are the same.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah,
They are the same.
right.
Whatever the name is and whatever the definition is, they both apply to the same thing.
I think, well, okay. So now that I understand what proposition here, when he says of which they form the predicate, this is throwing me off a little bit. Is he
So I'm making a truth claim that I can use to apply to predict something.
okay? So the truth claim itself is supposed to be predicable of of that I can use to be predicable of different individual subjects as needed
Within a category.
within a category. So the substance and the differentiae are the two pieces that I put together to make that claim, and that would be a
Yes.
definition.
So, and it's in that second sentence, then that's our original discussion about the word subject.
Okay, yeah, right.
For all supposition, for all such
Such
suppositions, truth claims have for their subject either the individual or the species.
have for
So
their
I'm
subject.
making a truth claim. I'm saying, here's a primary substance, here are some differentia. I'm going to make a truth claim that can be used to predict either the individual or the species.
Okay, okay. So the grammar really screwed me up here. But
Yep.
yeah, so all such truth claims will either have an individual for the subject or the species for the subject.
Or the species for which the subject lies within.
Right. And so in both cases, the predicate that I'm formed from the substance and the differentiae
Have to be univocal.
have to be univocal. Okay.
If not, well, we're going to get into that later.
No, we can go
It,
into that.
it is true that, inasmuch as primary substance is not predicable of anything, it can never form the predicate of any proposition.
Why? Does he
Be-
explain why here? Did I miss that?
no, it is true that, inasmuch as primary substance is not predicable of anything, it can never form the predicate of any proposition. But of secondary substance, the species is predicated of the individual, the genus, both of the species and the individual. Similarly, the differentiae are predicated of the species and of the individuals. He's still just describing the hierarchy.
Okay. Okay, what the differentiator that applies to the species has to apply to the individual, or else it wouldn't be part of the species. I get that.
Yep,
And let me go back. I'm going backwards here because I'm trying to I'm trying to
sure.
figure out to make sure I got this. But of secondary substances, the species is predicated of the individual, the genus, both of the species and of the individual. The genus is predicated of the species and
And
of the individual.
yeah, the hierarchy.
Right. Okay. Dude, the grammar is insane here. Because he's doing the hierarchy backwards. But okay.
Yes,
Okay, okay.
he is.
Okay. All right. I
And
get it.
and the same applies to the differentiae.
Right. Okay.
Because when I define something, I'm not defining an individual, I'm defining the substance of
Right.
that is found within the species that may or may not be present within the individual. Well, according to Aristotle, it's not found in the individual.
Okay, I gotta use another example here just to make sure okay. All fruit have seeds. So all apples have seeds because they're fruit.
Yeah.
So this apple has seeds. But then if someone else walks in the room and they say, "Oh, what is that?" And I said it's an apple and it has seeds, then they wouldn't be able to work from that to be like, "Oh, that must be like that
Now you
must
hand them a watermelon.
be right, exactly. Like that must be the exact same thing as like this watermelon because it also has seeds. And it's like, well, it's not necessarily true. Like you're right here in this case, but if you start thinking like that, then everything that could potentially have seeds, like flowers, right? Then he pulls
Yes.
out okay, not flowers.
And
Sorry.
this is
No.
why this is why most arguments very rarely center, and especially in philosophy, very rarely do, if you don't know philosophy and you get into a conversation with someone who's into philosophy, they're, oh, well, you're arguing semantics. No, how you define things is very important to understanding your philosophy.
Yeah, I mean you are arguing semantics, but semantics are super important.
Yes.
People are
And
just
if you
like,
say, well, semantics don't matter, well, then don't talk to a philosopher.
right, yeah, I get it. Okay. Okay, I'm following so far. But it was stated above.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I think that's where we were. Right. I'm just trying to make sure. But it was stated above that the word univocal was applied to those things which had both the name and definition in common. It is therefore established that in every proposition, truth claim, of which either substance or a differentiae forms the predicate, these are predicated univocally. Okay. All right. Yep. Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Just one
Thank
little
God.
slide. One little
Fuck you.
slide.
I've
It's
cussed more this episode than we ever. Oh, man, this is, oh my gosh. Okay. Yeah.
well,
Show me.
because it's not how we typically think.
No, because you're not introduced to the world in this way. Because you're introduced to the world with your senses, you know?
Yes.
Um,
And one of the first things that you will learn if you ever took an advanced course in the philosophy of science is the last thing you should trust are your senses.
yeah, as your sense. Yeah.
But how do most of us get around the world?
Well, using your senses.
Using your senses. Because if you don't use your senses, well, you're going to have problems getting around this world safely.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So just one little slide. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have something called a substance, manhood. We have two things called differentia. Oops, and I misspelled it. Let's
Maybe
pretend like
E
there's
there.
an E
Yeah.
at the
That's
end.
okay. Yeah. Everybody use your imagination.
There you go.
Yeah.
And we have something called man, which is a species.
Okay.
Now, previously, he intimated, and it was in one of our previous slides, that within a species we have differentiae. Yes?
Yeah.
But now he's saying, I don't care if it's a substance, I don't care if it's a differentiae. It is only used to form a truth claim about a species. It is not found within the species.
Right.
That's what these whole four paragraphs are talking about. And this is a very important statement or a series of statements because it's what allows us to get what in the modern era, I say the modern era, in the last 130 years ago, this idea of positivism.
Sure. Yeah. Which we can, let's, yeah, let's not get into that.
We're not going to get into it, but it's just this idea that when I look at something like man as a species, I'm not looking at the individual because I can't describe the group based on one individual.
Right. Or actually, honestly, like any number of individuals, you have to look past individuality as a concept in order to see the species.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and so you have to get to these primary substances and you have to, and what a positivist would then do is look at those differentiae. Which differentiae do I want to look at? Do I want to look at this characteristic called terrestrial? Do I want to look at this characteristic called two-footed? Are they good, quote unquote, good characteristics to use to define univocally, right? It has to apply to all, it has to apply to that species.
Right. Okay. And
Not
I can see,
sometimes yes, sometimes no.
right. Okay. I was gonna say, and I can see where here again, he's this model really helps in showing like how he's building off of Socrates when Socrates, which one was it? Well, it was definitely in Euthyphro, and it might have been in Phaedo, and maybe Crito as well. But there's multiple different examples of him asking a question about, let's say, justice. What is justice? Somebody would bring an example, and he'd be like, "And is that what justice is? Like,
Yes.
is that what it is? Is that the definition of all justice?" And it's like, okay, well, another example that's virtually the same thing, and yet it's not just. So it can't be that, right? So
Right.
we keep looking at these individual things to help us define what a concept or a species or a primary like what Aristotle is now naming this a primary substance, right?
Yes.
Okay.
What
Okay.
is what is manhood?
Right. Socrates was calling this a first order, and Aristotle's calling it a primary substance.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Because one the if I look at the species of man, some people will hear that and think they're talking about males, right?
Right.
But we're not talking about males. We're talking about a species called man.
Right.
So there are within the species called man, which we don't use that word anymore, but back then they used that word.
Right.
That word included males and females and anything else you want to categorize
Right.
that has or describe, not categorize. They all fit within this species called man.
Right.
So we can't describe the individual and say, because we've described this individual, we now have described the species.
Right. Okay. Okay. I get it. This is making sense.
I have
Holy
to
shit.
have a definition. I have to have primary substances that are universal. If it's not universal, then I need to account for that lack of universality because it must be univocal.
Right. Okay.
And we can get into a whole discussion on, how people sometimes go through this life and do foolish things because because I'm this way, everyone's this way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess to try to put it succinctly there, they um they mistake heuristics for being predicable
Yes.
univocally to everybody of whatever they thought they identified.
Yes.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and what would we would what is that we call? What do we what's the slang, or I say the slang term? Oh, them, they're all like that.
Wait, what are we?
If someone were to say, that person, you point out a characteristic and you say they're all like that.
Well, I guess that would be a stereotype.
Stereotype.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. See, a stereotype is going the exact opposite direction.
Right. It's just yeah. Okay. This is making sense. Oh, this actually made me physically tired. Oh
I
my
know.
God.
I
Okay,
know.
hold on. Let me bear with me real quick. I'm still trying to just think about this and see if there's anything I'm missing or feeling even weird about. I have to go really slowly with this one. Sorry, there's a lot of dead air. But like, okay, yeah, I get this. I get this. I can apply this in my head to shit. This is making sense.
Yeah, and we're building up to some things. We're building up to some ideas. And if you know anything about philosophy, you're already jumping ahead and you're already thinking, well, why don't you just say this and why don't you just say that? Well, but we can't say this and we can't say that because we've yet to lay the foundation to say this and to say that because it's 2,500 years ago, not today.
Yeah, and then not yeah. Uh, in fact, if you're thinking that, then you need to actually check yourself because then you might be missing the whole point of what Aristotle's claim is here, of what he's trying to organize. There has to be a sequential nature to these things, and they have to be in order, which is literally what we're doing here. That's why we're not using different language to describe this, or we're
Yes.
not we're like even when like Smokey just brought up like positivism. We want to be really careful with that because we want to be careful with that for the same reason that we're not reading like Kant right now. We're reading Aristotle, and we want to be careful with it also for the same reason that this like model exists right here. You
Yes.
have to you have to work in that direction to be technically this work right now is not predicable of Kant.
Yes.
Like it's not, right? Any more than what Aristotle's talking about right now is present in Descartes' work. There's not
Yes.
there's no present, it's not presence there, right? Descartes was discussing it and there's themes of it and he's making like counterpoints or whatever, but he's not the totality of what Aristotle's talking about doesn't exist within Descartes' work
And
anymore.
yet you can read Descartes and see Aristotle.
Right, right.
I cannot I cannot take the affirmative approach and say, well, I've read Aristotle, therefore I see Descartes.
No, but Descartes' work is predicable of Aristotle.
Yes.
So we have to work our way towards that.
Just
Now,
because I
I,
see it doesn't mean you see it.
this is insane, dude. Oh my God. Okay.
Learning to think this way, not easy. It's not easy. And there was a time in, and to a certain degree, that time still exists where if you haven't read Aristotle, you haven't read Plato, then you're not educated
Right.
because this lays the foundation for a classical education, a
Right.
liberal education.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Cool. Yeah. Sorry. A lot of dead air. Thank you guys for being
No,
patient with me on getting this. I'm talking to the viewers, not you, Smokey. You have to deal with it. Uh, but yeah, no, in all seriousness, this was freaking crazy. And it's probably going to ruin my week. I'm probably not going to be able to focus on anything. I'm supposed to visit my family pretty soon here, and I'm just going to be yapping about this bullshit and killing them all week. Um, Guys, thank you so much for watching this and for supporting us. Please continue. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment if you have a question or any thoughts, and we will see you guys next Thursday.